Welcome, everybody. Tonight we are talking with Christine Wilson, who's done a number of informational workshops for us, as well as doing lots of yoga with us. And she was at our retreat in May and actually presented this topic and presentation at the retreat, and it was wildly popular. So we wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to hear it. It's based on the book When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate. Hopefully, I'm saying his name right. And I didn't even get a chance to hear it at the retreat, so I'm really looking forward to hearing the presentation tonight. I know everyone who attended it really had a lot of great positive feedback about it. So I hope everyone enjoys. Christine is a certified yoga therapist. She does wonderful work for anyone who's gone through any kind of trauma using yoga to help to heal that trauma. And she works with clients one-on-one. She does a 30-minute free consultation if you're interested in that. Um, and she's just a wonderful person, and we just love having her as part of our Breast Friends community. So with that, I'll let you go ahead and take it away, Christine.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you everybody for taking the time to be here this evening. I really appreciate this, and I am really, really excited to share this material with you. Um, when I when I first started doing my yoga therapy training, I was introduced to Dr. Gabor Mate, and the first thing somebody told me about him is that in his view, anger is actually um, depression. And that when we are manifesting depression, it is because we are suppressing some kind of underlying anger. And that really blew my mind that, and then thinking about it, thinking about people in my life who had been diagnosed with depression and that how much that made sense in the context of their situations. I was immediately intrigued by that and started watching videos on YouTube, of which there are tons and tons if you're interested in learning more. And then reading books and now presenting his material. Number one, because it really resonated with me so much how our thoughts and feelings affect our physical health, and not in a way like it's our fault for feeling or thinking a certain way, but in that when we think or feel anger, for instance, or fear, it creates a hormonal response in our bodies that then impact our physical health. And that was a totally new concept to me. And one of the beauties in Dr. Gabor Mate's work is I think it is really well aligned with the practice and the philosophy of yoga, in that it's all about finding reconnection to ourselves, cultivating compassion for ourselves, being curious about ourselves enough to study ourselves and feel our own feelings without distracting ourselves from them or stuffing them down or suppressing them in another way, just so that it can manifest with a different chemical reaction that will impact our bodies again in a different way. So it gives me a lot of hope because leads me to believe that we have a lot more power over our physical health than we think we do, but also that it's not a quick or easy fix. It is, in many, many cases, decades and decades of programming and thinking the same thoughts the same way over and over again. And it is literally a relearning and an undoing of all of that stuff that we've been brought up with in our families and in our society. So, With that being said, that is why I think his work, Dr. Gabor Mate, and yoga is a wonderful match. So I'm going to share my screen here, and you will see, if all the stars align, you will see a little PowerPoint slide. Oop, I think it's this one. Does it look right, Amy?
Yep, that
Beautiful.
looks good.
Beautiful. All right. So again, this is his work here. And we'll go to the next slide. Beautiful. So we'll start by inviting presence, which is a practice that we do both in any kind of yoga practice, whether that's a physical practice of postures or asana, or a meditation practice, or a visualization practice, or a breathing practice, or some combination thereof. The first thing we want to do is be present in our bodies. The work of Dr. Gabor Mate, I think I've pretty much shared, but we'll get to that slide, and about his book, and then we'll do a practice together at the end. But first, let's just invite some presence. So by presence, I mean to be fully here in your body and in this experience, and not enraptured with your thoughts about this experience. So many of us as humans are thinking, I should be doing something else right now. After this is over, I'm going to have a bowl of ice cream. Or I wish I wouldn't have called my mother today. Or this is really stupid. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And we get wrapped up in our thoughts about the experience that we're having rather than have the experience. So I invite you to let go of any judgments or preconceived thoughts or expectations or any kind of attachment to what this workshop will be and what it might mean to you, and just let yourself be present. So, the first thing we can do to do that is feel into our physical bodies. And if it's safe for you to close your eyes, I encourage you to do that, because you can really come inward once your eyes are closed. And at least then you let go of all the stimulus from your senses, from your sight, and just closing your eyes and coming inward a little bit. You might notice yourself a little more in your body. Maybe you notice your breath or your feet on the ground. You might feel your palms resting on your lap. Just really come inward, invite yourself to be home in your body. And when the thoughts do arise, and they will, because we're human, invite yourself to come back to whatever sensation is helping you to keep anchored in yourself. Whether that's focusing on your breath or your feet on the ground, or the sound of my voice, whatever you can sense, whatever you feel, let it keep you anchored here to this present moment. And then as you're ready, take a nice big inhale and then let it go out your nose or mouth with a heavy sigh. You might do that once or twice more if that felt nice. And become present in your body. And now, with yourself fully here in this moment, you might like to blink your eyes open, or maybe just continue to listen to the sound of my voice. And we'll move on to one of the basic anchors, one of the foundations of Dr. Gabor Mate's work is about attachment and authenticity. So we have two biological imperatives for survival. Well, the first, of course, being survival. We will do anything to survive. And there are two things that we really need to do in order to survive or to have or exhibit, especially when we're first born, especially when we're little kids. Humans stay with their parents longer than any other species on Earth. Children, babies would not be able to survive without attachment to some human who can take care of them. In an ideal world, that's a biological parent, maybe even two. And those parents are well-adjusted, mentally healthy people that have well-regulated nervous systems, and they can take really healthy, connected care of this baby. But the baby has to have somebody, and it really doesn't judge who that somebody is. So they attach to this caregiver or they die, and they will do whatever is necessary to stay attached to this caregiver. If they get a feeling from the caregiver that if they cry a lot, the caregiver will yell at them and they don't like to be yelled at, eventually they'll learn that their caregiver does not respond well to crying, and they'll learn to be quiet. Or and that's not like a conscious decision that the baby makes, right? The baby is just a body. They're not a thinking mind yet. So they implicitly hold this belief in their bodies that crying for help will get bad results. It'll get an angry mom, or maybe no mom at all, or caregiver. So it does whatever it needs to do in order to get that caregiver to take care of them. And sometimes we will develop what's called an attachment wound when the caregiver doesn't respond to our needs. And that is grounds right there for developing anxiety as an adult. The other biological imperative that we have in order to survive is authenticity. And I had heard before that it is important to be authentic in my yoga practice, but I had never really connected the dots of why I had to be authentic in order to survive. But that's literally how we listen to our gut feelings, how we tap into our intuition, and how we keep ourselves safe. So if you're a young child and you, let's see here, you like to draw and you draw lots of pictures, and maybe you draw on the wall and you get in lots of trouble for it. And maybe your caregiver rips up your drawings or yells at you for it or something. You might stifle your love of drawing in order to do that. Or maybe you don't want to eat your dinner and you're not hungry, and your caregiver is like, you have to eat this dinner. You're not going to move from this table until you eat this whole entire dinner. And so you learn not to trust yourself. You learn not to express yourself. And when we do that, it creates cortisol in our bodies, which contribute to a whole bunch of health issues like osteoporosis and high blood pressure and high blood sugar and heavy abdominal fat and all kinds of things that are health risks for us. But that's exactly what happens when we suppress our emotions and when we suppress our gut feelings. We will create that cortisol, and it just becomes a kind of a feedback loop on itself. So we also, when we suppress, any of our quote unquote negative feelings, we also begin to close ourselves off to our more positive feelings. Because if we're used to suppressing feelings, or even worse, if maybe you got really excited when your grandpa was going to take you to Disneyland and he said, "You need to calm yourself down or we're not going to go," you might learn, oh, when I'm really excited, I must remain calm. And you might never get to jump up and down and scream for joy, because that's bad. And that's again something implicit that we hold in our bodies, and we develop neuro pathways so that they become habits so that we can survive out in the world. And some of those neuro pathways are wonderful. It's wonderful to learn how to feed yourself and tie your shoes and eventually drive a car. Those are neuro pathways, or what in yoga is known as samskaras, or habits, habitual patterns, that we learn in our bodies before we ever consciously make a decision to. So we need to cultivate the courage to be our vulnerable, imperfect self. And we need to share our feelings with ourselves in a way that feels safe to us and accepted by us, because the thing is, all of this work happens inside ourselves. While we're children and we're still attaching to a caregiver, we have to have that caregiver for survival, and we have to adapt to what they need us to be, and maybe even to the point where we are no longer our authentic selves, in order to keep that attachment safe, or as safe it is as it's going to be, for our survival. But eventually, when we grow up, we have the option to kind of reparent ourselves and attach to our own selves in a healthy way. Some of us may never have the opportunity to do that with our actual caregivers or our partners, but we can always do that with ourselves. So these adaptations that we develop in order to have that attachment, are, like I said, these patterns that we develop early on in our life. And eventually we might even begin to think of them as our personality. We might feel like, oh, yes, I'm the kind of person that whenever anybody needs the ride to the airport, I always take them. And if you need me to take care of your cat, I'll take care of your cat. And I'm just a helpful, people pleasing person, not seeing maybe that they're neglecting themselves. And that is one thing that Dr. Mate says is a major risk factor for disease. And I quote his book here: a compulsive and self sacrificing doing for others, suppression of anger, and an excessive concern about social acceptability. In other words, not listening to yourself, not honoring your own authenticity, not caring about what you need or what you want. And like I said, this can result in problems later along in life. And one of the examples that I've heard is about, really simply, if you live in the Colorado Rockies in December, you're going to be wearing the heaviest parka you can wear, and you'll be wearing long underwear, and you'll have earmuffs and gloves and everything to keep you nice and warm. But if you move to Southern California and you continue to wear those clothes to keep yourself protected in that way, you will eventually die of overheat, of heat exhaustion, right? So we have these adaptations to keep us safe, but at a certain point, they're no longer keeping us safe and may actually be harmful for us. And also, again, the cortisol, the fight or flight, it is stressful to constantly be playing a role. It is stressful to always be showing up in situations, or a situation where you feel like you cannot be yourself. It sends that, the adrenaline and the fight or flight response when you're really activated, or maybe the freeze or fawn response when you're really shut down. Either way, we always have this low level of cortisol running through our bodies, because we're constantly just a little bit on guard. We're just a little bit on guard that people will find out that we're not really who we say we are, that we can't share our authentic self, that we always have to put a smile on, or that we constantly have to be the one to be the caregiver. And then the more we resist those felt emotions, the more we suffer. And again, it becomes that loop. The more you suffer, the more you resist, the more you resist, the more you suffer. And resistance can look different in different ways for different people. It can be addiction to drugs or alcohol or anything like that. It can be distraction to the internet or, watching TV or eating something. Or it can simply be denial, just like I said, fight or flight, just running away and you know letting it go. Or trying to anyway. And so we kind of have this healing trauma model I've only listed here the parts that really overlap for yoga and Gabor Mate. There's a lot more I could share on both subjects, but these are the ones that really mesh in a way that I find are mutually supporting. So the first thing that you want is to create a sense of safety. And what that looks like is living in a stable way where you're able to regulate your own nervous system, where you have a support network of people that you trust, where you have a secure attachment to yourself and or other people. So that's a big piece of work right there. Just getting to a point where you feel safe. And you might not have a secure attachment to yourself. And that might be the first place to start is, and we'll get this later on in the presentation here, but the first step in yoga is tapas. That is the first stage where we begin to build some kind of daily practice that will start to regulate our nervous systems and will start to increase our own sense of secure attachment to ourselves and help us to get a little bit closer to our real, true authenticity. In all fairness, many of us don't even know who we are authentically are, especially if we grew up being, pleasing mom and dad, or maybe even caregiving for mom and dad in some cases, and then maybe getting married early and kind of stepping into the role of wife and stepping into the role of mother, or whatever your situation happened to be. Just taking that time to begin to get to know who you are and what you really want out of life can take years sometimes of practice. And so this practice doesn't have to be really big or major. In fact, one of the things that we encourage is just taking a small step, one thing that you can do for yourself every day to begin to build that secure attachment or that trust in your own self. Because your inner self, your inner child, your core, your wounded self, whatever you might want to call it, the part of you that is suppressed, the part of you that isn't allowed to feel its feelings or express itself, that part needs to learn to trust you. And like, for instance, I smoked from the time I was 12 years old until, I don't know, not long enough ago, honestly. I think I quit in 2017. So I smoked for a long period of my life, and I quit several times during that period of time, once for 3 years, and then started smoking again. But the thing was, I kept telling myself, I'm going to quit smoking. And then I'd start again. And there was always that little voice in my head that would say, I knew it. I knew you weren't going to do it. And that was every time I did that, I was losing that trust in myself. And when I finally quit for good, and this was, I have to be honest, a good year into my regular yoga practice. So here I was going to yoga and doing these breathing practices and then going to smoke a cigarette after class. So it did take me a while to get there. But when I finally got there, it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to pull up my bootstraps and I'm going to you know, just try to make it work. And I know I'm not going to be able to make it. It was just, I'm not going to smoke today. And then I'm not going to smoke the next day. And just sticking with that one day at a time. I can do this for one more day. And also the yoga helped because especially the breathing practices, it and some of them can give you that same sense of just taking a deep breath and letting it out with a big exhale, like we did at the beginning of our time together. And that's really what you're getting with that hit of cigarette, besides all the toxic stuff that's in there too. So these are things I'm learning in my brain and also feeling in my body. And I'm just taking it one day at a time and I'm building that trust within myself slowly but surely. So that's that s- stabilizing yourself, regulating yourself, nervous system regulation, really noticing when you're in fight or flight and learning the exercises from both Dr. Mate's work and yoga and many other healing modalities that you might be interested in to learn how to come out of that sympathetic nervous system response and into the parasympathetic nervous response where we can calm and restore and relax and heal. And then the next part is processing trauma memories. And many of us, most of us, will benefit from therapy of some sort in this aspect, just to have either a yoga therapist or a psychiatrist or anywhere in between, whatever you think, really resonates with your authentic self. What kind of attachment style do you have? What triggers your fight or flight response? Can you develop the healthy tools to support yourself now that you're a grown up and you don't need to rely on a caregiver anymore? So that authentic self, or that attachment self, you may have learned at an early age that if you were going to cry, that your mom would just ignore you anyway. And so now, as a grown up person, when you have, a sore rib and you think maybe it's broken, you're like, yeah, well, probably I don't wanna bother the doctor anyway, and it's probably fine because you're so conditioned to not ask for help. So that might be something you might notice in therapy. And I only mention that as an example because that's something that I took away from that is that I was so conditioned to not ask for help. And it was viewed as a positive personality trait because Christine is so independent. And so I viewed that as, just solidifying my value of not having to ask for help. And then when I literally can't manage anymore and I finally do ask for help, it triggers all of this shame response around that. And that's very, very common, especially in women. And, I don't want to stereotype anything, and I'm trying to be conscious about there are many different family styles and many different ways we can be caregivers in our lives. But many women, especially, carry this people pleasing, not wanting to ask for help part of their personality that everybody says is kind of a badge of honor. There's a story in Dr. Gabor Mate's book about a woman who had breast cancer, and she was married to a man whose previous wife had died from breast cancer. And when she was diagnosed, her first thought was not of her, but of how was her husband going to manage having to go through this again. It's just, that, like I said earlier, that kind of obsessive need to please other people and take care of other people before taking care of ourselves. But then once we get some therapy and we get some tools and we work with ourselves and we maybe find a support network like Breast Friends is for you all, or some other support group that might be helpful for you, you begin to kind of move on. You start to feel responsible for and connected to yourself. And again, like I said, you have to pace yourself. It's not a quick fix. If you think about it, if it took 40 years to get here, it might take that long and maybe even longer to get to a place where you never ever thought you'd be. But it's worth the journey. And then that self-compassion piece is super, super important, to have radical compassion for yourself, like you were your own grandchild or your own child or your favorite little puppy or whatever, some creature in your life for whom you would just do anything to make them happy and to see them smile and to know that something that you did made them feel good. And that's what we want here, is to befriend ourselves in such a way that we have that sort of attitude towards ourselves. And then recovery, oddly enough, the words recover, it's recovering yourself. That is what healing also means at its core, is coming back together, rejoining. That's healing. That's wound healing, both mental and physical and emotional. And so here is where the yoga part comes in. The first thing we want to do is set an intention. So maybe back when I was quitting smoking, this would have been a good thing. I didn't learn all of this until I was a yoga therapist. I was still a yoga teacher when I quit smoking, but I later learned how this fit in. So setting an intention, the Sanskrit word is sankalpa, and san means a connection with the highest truth, and kalpa means a vow. So this is our affirmation that we are going to do or achieve something, or maybe let go of something. That might be another thing that we want to do. And in this particular example, quitting smoking, I knew in my heart of hearts it was terrible for me physically. I didn't like how it felt socially. My children were upset about it, and I wanted to live to see some potential grandchildren someday. So that was my highest truth, and that was my vow to myself, that I was going to do something about it. So the tapas, that's your daily discipline. And at an early stage of yoga, that might just be laying in bed and intentionally taking 5 breaths in the morning before you get up for the day. Just taking that time, that's literally 60 seconds, to take 5 deep breaths and just be in your body for a moment before you get up to greet the day. Or maybe it is pouring a cup of tea and sitting outside on your porch and watching the sunrise, because that's something that makes you connected to nature or to yourself. Or you might decide you want to do a 10-minute yoga practice or a 5-minute meditation practice, or maybe call that therapist and start getting weekly therapy, or whatever it is that you know in your deep, authentic self, that's what you want to move towards. And just taking that daily step, what we call in yoga is a dinacharya, a daily practice. And that might include more things. It might be self-care. It might be a bath every day, or it might be lighting a candle or saying a prayer. Or maybe it is a series of things. Maybe your discipline that you practice is in the morning, and maybe it's in the evening, or maybe some other time that works for you. This is not a one size fits all practice. This is all about getting to know you, and there's only one of you. Then that part is svadhyaya, beginning to practice self-study. seeing yourself with clarity, noticing what happens as a result of your daily discipline. So, in my particular example with yoga, quitting smoking, obviously I knew I wanted to quit smoking, and I knew that I felt better when I didn't do it. But another thing that's a part of self study is, like I said, getting that therapy, being able to, like, for instance, if you had that attachment issue with your caregiver, where if you asked for help, nobody would come. So you develop this attachment that, or this belief that if you ask for help, nobody's going to come. So you better just do it all yourself and never ask for help. Well, as you grow up and you maybe get married or in a relationship, or maybe you have a really great job and you need some help, but you feel ashamed to ask for help. And perhaps that damages your relationship or makes you mess something up at your job. I mean, that does not serve us anymore. And doing the self study or going to therapy, which are, the same thing really, is to not make you feel even more ashamed that you have this adaptation. It's so that you can see with clarity, this is why I always have a hard time asking for help. It's not a real belief. It is not a truth that it is bad to ask for help. It's actually good to ask for help, and I should be able to ask for help. And it is a sign of strength to admit when we don't know everything, because we all know none of us knows everything anyway. So just being able to go without any self-judgment, oh, this is where this comes from. And then beginning to change those patterns, those samskaras, those neuro pathways. Every time we notice, I need to ask for help, but I don't want to. And then we change that story to, it's okay to ask for help. And then going and asking for help, you begin to change that pattern slowly but surely, developing newer, healthy, more supportive patterns. And then the last part of the kriyas of yoga, that yoga of action, that yoga of making a change in our life, is Ishvara Pranadhana. And it literally means surrender. And I had a really hard time with this. Because just the word surrender kind of sounds like giving up, or, forget it, I'm just going to smoke anyway, or never mind, I'm just not going to do what I need to ask for help to do, or whatever the situation might be. It doesn't mean surrender like that. It means giving up the illusion of being in control. It means making the effort even though you don't know what the outcome might be. It means doing your best without any attachment to how things might end up in the long run. It means accepting reality for what it is instead of just being in denial or shoving things down. And it means accepting reality whether we like it or not, really. It might be like, "Oh, I'm not gonna be happy at all until I get that car, and, this is I just need to have that car in order to be happy." Well, the reality is actually have an old Prius, and it's a good car, and it gets me where I wanna go, and it would be nice to have a new car, but if I don't have a new car anytime soon, that's still okay. I'm still going to be fine. Or the aversion piece of it that's like, oh, I can't stand that guy I work with. He is so rude and he's so mean and he's racist and I can't stand it. He's talks too close to me or whatever. But if you can get to a point where, well, this is where I work and this is the guy I work with and that's reality, and I just surrender to that, rather than sitting there suffering and obsessing and ruminating about it all the time. I can just go, okay, this is what it is. I can't make reality change, but I can take that one daily step, take that tapas, and I can study myself to see who I really am, what I really want, and what is going to nurture me and honor me. maybe eventually you will get to a place where you get that car or that guy leaves your office, you know? Just have to be in that place of acceptance and doing your best and letting go of whatever that outcome might be. Sometimes the outcome might not be great. Maybe my son culpa might be to learn how to do a headstand. And so I take that daily step every day to do all the core exercises and the balance exercises and stuff like that. And then when I start to kick myself up, I can feel my neck getting like really compromised. And I go, okay, I'm going to give up on that because I can tell my body is not into it. And maybe that's what comes of the self study. It doesn't necessarily mean achieving something, it might be letting go of something. So, in this particular book of Dr. Mate's, he offers this question: is there something in your life to which you would like to say no to, that you really want to say no to? Is there something that you're doing because you feel obligated or like it's socially acceptable or whatever it might be that your body wants to say no to? Or conversely, is there something to which you would like to say yes? Something that you've been telling yourself, no, I can't do that thing. People will think it's silly. I'm not going to do it. Is there something like that that you want to say yes to? So, what I'd like to invite you to do here is maybe we'll take the next 5 to 7 minutes. And if you've got a piece of paper or a Word document, you can open a pencil or a pen. And actually, I would encourage you to write this. You can do it on your computer if that's easier for you. But if you have a piece of paper and a pen or pencil, um, there's kind of a fun little way that you can do this practice. So the first question, is there somewhere you want to say no or yes? And then we'll follow that up by what is that impact of not saying yes or of not saying no on you physically or emotionally or in your relationships? And then you might wonder why you're unable to say yes or no. Does it stem from like an old story that your mom said you were klutzy and what you really want to do is take some dance lessons and you're like, no, I don't want to do that because I'm really klutzy anyway. My mom always said that. Well, so what? If that's what you want to do. What's the story behind that? That's that reprocessing those trauma memories. And then without judgment or self criticism, just ask yourself why that is. Why can't you say no? And what is the story behind that? So, one of the things that I love really with this particular practice, all of the questions are written down for you, so you don't have to write the questions down. But if the questions were not written down, I would ask you to write the question with your dominant hand. So, if you're right handed, with your right hand, and then write the answer with your non dominant hand. So, what that does for me is really simplifies that answer because it's super hard to write with my left hand. And so you might think, well, I'm not saying yes to dancing because I'm really klutzy and my mom always said that and blah, blah, blah. But maybe if you have to really boil it down to what you can write with that non dominant hand, you'll be able to simplify that down to its very core, like, I'd be embarrassed or I'd feel shame. So with all these 4 questions, it's 6:50 right now. We'll give it until 6:54, 55 to just answer what you want to answer. Just let yourself, without judgment, have whatever comes up come up. And the answers might not necessarily come to you in words. It might just be an impression or a feeling or a picture.
I'll
I
share
can
something.
share.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
go ahead, Sherry. No, go.
um, what came up for me is something that I'm still trying to do, but yet, so I quit my job. Um, I was a principal of a school 2 weeks ago, and I was thinking about what have not been able to say no to or yes to, and it's related to that. And so I feel a little stuck. Like what I'm saying no to is getting training in something else because I feel too old or too sick or it won't pay off. But the consequences of not, I did the first step. I quit a really stressful job. Um, but I don't know what to do next because I'm stuck in the kind of the examples of if I take a new class, like I'm almost 50 and I'll be with 21-year-olds and where is that going to lead me? And um, that sort of thing. And also, I don't want to manage people anymore. It makes me feel isolated and alone. So this practice helped me again to realize I'm caught in my own age. I'm caught in my own shutting down future opportunities and kind of help clarify connections really important to me. And working with people has been the way I've connected, and moving into management has made it so I feel actually less connected when I work with people. So I need to work on that and work through that a little bit more. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you so much for sharing, Sherry. That's really powerful. And I totally relate to what you are sharing, as a matter of fact, because I entered my yoga therapy training at 53. And I think the next oldest person was 35. So I was definitely in that upper age group and felt a little out of place. But I want to encourage you. It's for me, because I found this after reconnecting or maybe connecting to my authentic self for the first time, not until I was about 50. This has been the most meaningful thing I've ever done with my work. And I am really excited to be able to say that this is the best part, my best my life has ever been. And 20 years ago I was thinking it's all over. You know, but it's only just beginning. So I'm really excited for you and excited to see or hear about what you come up with at this new stage of your life. That's
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Did anyone else have anything that they would like to share? You don't have to share everything that you came up with, maybe just one piece that you might think other people might benefit hearing from. Sometimes when we're in a group like this, we're sort of hesitant to share. But I promise you, there's somebody else here that can relate to whatever you're going through and might benefit from hearing what you have to say. Carol, I see you've unmuted yourself.
Yes. What came up for me is that um, if when I say no to something, it makes me feel like I'm just being lazy. And so I try to do too much and I wear myself out and I feel stuck. And when I'm not doing anything, I just sit at my computer all day, which is not healthy. Um, and I'm not really sure where to pull the plug. And I foster animals, so this is my foster cat.
That's lovely. I see there's another kitty cat up here too with Liz. That's adorable. I'm happy to see your animals. Mine will not come anywhere near me when I'm on the computer. But
You're
thank you.
lucky.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Carol. I wonder if you got to the part about why can you not say no? What's the story behind it's lazy to say no?
I have two sisters who I think are very lazy, and I don't want to become like my older sisters.
Mm-hmm.
So I do.
Well, where do you think you got that idea, though?
From my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it your belief or is it your mother's belief?
It's my belief.
Yeah. Because I know I had a similar belief. My parents were self-employed and I worked in their business for most of my life. This was aging myself a little bit. From the time I was 4, I was sweeping and cleaning ashtrays in the office. That's when you could smoke inside. And I remember my dad always, if he caught me not doing something, he would say, "Don't you have something you should be doing?"
Hmm.
Or even more terrifying, "I'll give you something to do." And it was always something terrible. It was never a good thing. So you got into this habit, or I got into this habit of always looking busy. I remember being married to my second husband, my stepdaughter's father is what I like to refer to him as. I still have a relationship with her, but neither of us have a relationship with him anymore. So that's its own little story. But I remember him coming home from work and I would be sitting on the couch watching Oprah, and I would immediately jump up and go grab the laundry basket. Even though he never said anything about, "Don't you have something you should be doing? I'll give you something to do." It was just my immediate, I feel guilty because I'm not I'm not producing, I'm not getting anything done. I'm just sitting here enjoying my afternoon with Oprah. And then later, I find out through a lot of my yoga therapy training how much we benefit from play. And what is play? Play is activity with no goal in mind. There's nothing to be gained by it. We're just having some joy. Just playing and moving our bodies helps us to be attached to our bodies in a healthy way, and it helps to develop creativity and the ability to improvise and critical thinking skills and social skills. And my parents did not see the value of play. And so was it my judgment that being lazy was bad? Or was that really maybe my mom's mom or her mother? All of these generations, we might as well blame Adam and Eve, really. I mean, it's cultural as much as it is familial. So maybe next time you feel lazy and you're finding yourself stuck at your computer, you might say, "What's something that I could do that would be fun and just make me feel good?" Maybe might be just working out in your yard, or maybe painting a picture, or writing a story, or calling somebody, because that connection and that play is just as important for us as we're older as it is when we're younger. In fact, maybe more so because now we have to do it all on our own. Yeah.
I have a question for you. Sorry, I am muted again. This brings up, and I do practice yoga, and I'm working on this with my therapist. We're all here wanting to learn more, and I feel like so much of the answers are individual when you mentioned it, but this is cultural. This is capitalism. This is grind culture.
Mm-hmm.
How are we expected to be little boats in this giant sea of busyness and productivity? I don't know how to join together or where to go to fight back against the system compared to just fix me, because it's not a me problem.
Right.
As I'm getting into this more and more, it's not a me problem, it's a we problem. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts or any resources for that. to
I
get bigger than just me and my yoga mat. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I do in this particular book, When the Body Says No, the subtitle is, whoop, that's not the one. That's not the one I wanted. Let me think for just a moment. Another one of his books, The Myth of Normal: Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. And he talks about the fact that we are in a toxic culture. And if you think about the word culture as like a petri dish in a laboratory, if the culture or the medium that's in the lab, if you add some cells to it and they all die or they start fighting each other or killing each other, you would say, oh my God, this culture is really toxic. We need to swap this out for a healthier culture. And that's exactly what we're seeing here in our culture. And yes, it is continuing on, and it can be extremely overwhelming and kind of defeatist as far as like feeling like, why should I even vote? My vote means so little. Why should I bother eating vegan when big agriculture is so big? I mean, what can I do as one little person? And that is the thing, is we are all one little person. But that's one of the reasons that I share yoga, because yoga changed my life. Yoga changed who I thought I was into who I truly am. And just to, I know I have not come across it yet. I'm not sure if there's a Sanskrit word for it, but somewhere in there, I did a yoga posture that must mean get your head out of your ass pose, because I literally did get my head out of my ass. I was so wrapped up in my own little world. I was so distracted and, pushing my feelings away. I would pour a glass of wine or smoke a cigarette or pick a fight with my husband or quit my job because these people sucked, and then quit that job because those people sucked. And, just constantly trying to please my parents, constantly trying to be who I thought I needed to be in order to fit in with the current group of people. My parents, like I said, were self-employed. They were and always have been Republicans, and I mean to the hardest of cores. They don't have any kind of spiritual life. And when I started going to church as a teenager, they made fun of me and shamed me for that, and so here I am deciding I don't want to be an accountant anymore. I want to teach yoga. They looked at me like I was a crazy hippie chick who now I'm not drinking anymore. And my God, that was the religion of my family. And good Lord, are you seriously telling me you're voting Democrat now? Are you praying? Don't tell your father that this is vegan. He's not going to want to eat it. How gross is that? I mean, and just on and on and on. My whole life, I spent trying to be attached to these people who were my caregivers and wanting to have my dad be proud of me and wanting my mother to value me, when all along I never was going to get the approval that I wanted from them. And when I finally said, you know what? I love you, but your beliefs and your values don't work for me anymore. They didn't want anything to do with me. And that is a price I ended up paying. But in turn, I ended up cultivating a deeper, much more strong relationship with my husband, with all of my children, being a part of my grandchildren's life, feeling like what I buy with my money when I spend it on vegan food is just contributing a tiny little bit to creating a healthier atmosphere for my grandchildren to grow up in. And the reason I am teaching this yoga, the reason that I am doing these workshops is because I think the more people that live their lives from this intentional, loving, kind and compassionate way, the more people will start living their lives from a kind, compassionate way, and it will just begin to grow and expand. And the more you surround yourselves with like-minded people, the more you read and educate yourself, the more you're willing to look at your own self as not the problem, but as part of the solution. The more you start to honor your authentic self and cultivate the gifts that you've been given in your life, the more that that's going to allow the people around you to also be completely themselves and honor themselves, and hopefully not have to wear masks and play roles that keep us from feeling vulnerable and afraid and ashamed. But I highly recommend The Myth of Normal. It is even beyond when the body says no, as far as it gets really expansive into all kinds of different illnesses, and how at their core, many of them, most of them are not DNA, most of them are not hereditary. Even something like, what is it, 7 out of every 100 women who are tested for the breast cancer gene that have breast cancer actually have the gene. So it's not a genetic disease. It's what is it that turns that gene on? What is it that makes those cells become abnormal? And I truly believe, from the science and from the ancient science of yoga, that we already have all of those answers. But we're letting this toxic culture kind of take the lead, and we need to get tapped into our own authenticity so that we can be our own leaders. Thank you for your question. I'm sure I went on a little bit too long, but I could talk about this stuff all day long. So, so if anybody else has anything to share or any other questions, we still have a good 18 minutes here or so.
Carol, that was a foster kitten with me too. So we both foster animals. Well, there's two things I wanted to say. So I just got diagnosed with 2 frozen shoulders, and I am pretty sure that like I can tell you when one started and when the other started, and they were both during times of like high anxiety when I wasn't taking care of myself, and in particular one this summer when I wasn't saying no to things that I should have been saying no. So I just find that interesting. But when we did the exercise, I've actually gotten pretty good at saying no to all sorts of things, and like I don't do my job the way people think I should. I don't dress the way people think I should. Do whatever the hell I want. But I've always been sort of like fine financially, but never more than fine. Never, like, with a few exceptions, never where, like, what I say to my wife is like, I wish we could go to Fred Meyer and just walk through the aisles and go, that's cute, let's get that. And so we're getting to the point where that's starting to happen. And I've noticed what I've been doing is finding ways to not take the money, like finding ways to deprive ourselves of having a little bit more. And I'm not quite sure where it comes from. I mean, I do know where it comes from. But so anyway, it was just something I thought about, and I was just doing this elaborate plan yesterday where we could take a smaller salary and put more money into an IRA, because we shouldn't have more than this amount of money. And now I'm like, well, maybe that's just a lot of deprivation and the source for anxiety.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Liz. I think a lot of people here can relate to that. We shouldn't spend the money. We should save it for a rainy day. Yeah. And like you said at first, I'm not sure where that comes from, but you do know where that comes from. Do you care to share that?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm not entirely sure, but I think it comes from two things. Like, one is I never, when I was growing up, my parents divorced when I was young, and so we never had enough. Well, that's what I was told. We never had enough. We never had enough. We never had enough. And and then basically I just started a career of never making enough money to ever feel very comfortable. So I kept choosing jobs that were like that. But also there's this thing where I do not want to be dependent on particularly my mother or my father, who, my mother is deceased, my dad is 92. I'm not going to be dependent on them, but that's what it was I was dependent on them and not well taken care of. And I'm afraid that if I spend my money, even a little bit of money, then I will be at the mercy of someone else who will not care for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're taught that. And so, like I said, when you're a child, that gets ingrained into your body. And you can tell yourself logically, we have plenty. We have more than enough. We can afford to spend this money and buy this thing. And you could tell yourself that logically in your head all day long, but it's not going to get down into your survival brain, that part of you that was developed when you were even in utero up to about 18 months. You didn't have any other way of storing information but in your body. And so when you're brought up that way, it becomes a neural pathway, it becomes a samskara, it becomes a pattern that we begin to live with. But the beauty of Dr. Mate's work and the philosophy of yoga is that we do have the power to change those things. We are able to create new neural pathways. Neuroplasticity has been really big in popular science lately because just a few short years ago, scientists thought that once our brains got to a certain age or a certain size, we just started losing brain cells and you eventually get dementia and Alzheimer's and die. But that's not true. They're showing that if you do puzzles and you continue to do meaningful work, and if you continue to learn new things and continue to educate yourself about new things, that you're actually strengthening those neural pathways, and you can learn how to do new things and you can learn how to let go of old things. It's really, really hard to quit doing something if you don't replace it with something else. So just saying, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that, but cultivating a new habit to replace that old habit, that replacement therapy can be really helpful there. So, and that's one of the things that we do in yoga, a meditation or a visualization where you're at Fred Meyer and there's something on the shelf that you want, and your immediate thought is, no, it's bad. I can't buy that. I don't have enough money. So you let yourself feel, okay, I feel like we don't have enough money to be able to buy that. And then you get curious about the feeling. Where did that feeling come up with? Is that even true? Is something else true? What is the truth about this? How do I really feel about it? What would be the loving thing that I could do for myself around this thing? And then take that loving action. And every time you practice something like that, this healing model that's in this PowerPoint here that I'm going to share with you, or an inner bonding exercise, or a visualization where even when you say, you could point to anything in the store and say, I could buy that if I wanted to. I could buy that if I wanted to. I'm so grateful for all the abundance in our life. It sounds like, oh, this is just woo-woo yoga crap. But this positive affirmations literally have the power to change the neural pathways in your body. And when you begin to change those neural pathways, you change your body's biochemical reaction to those pathways. So instead of releasing adrenaline and cortisone, those stress hormones that just keep us going and going and going, now you're releasing hormones that come from gratitude, like serotonin and oxytocin and endorphins. All of those really beneficial for us hormones are expressed in our body whenever we're compassionate or empathetic or appreciative. And so when we simply switch how we frame those things, we are turning on new neural pathways in our bodies that support healthy chemical reactions in our bodies that create healing, support our immune system, support our relationships, and most importantly, support our relationship to ourselves. Because when we pay attention to ourselves, when we honor ourselves, we build trust in ourselves, and then we can cultivate that place of safety and stability and connection. And yeah, also in yoga, if you were my client, I would comment on the fact that the shoulders are linked to both the throat and the heart chakras. And when you have shoulder issues, it can often mean that you feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders, literally, like you have too much to bear, and that maybe you're having a really hard time communicating that, speaking about it, speaking your truth, sharing what's real for you, or because this is the area of communication, maybe there's something you're not listening to that you don't want to hear. So just something to think about there. If we're talking at the yoga chakra level, that's kind of what we would be interested in there. But I like to, because my entry into yoga was very Western. Like I said, I was a Republican without any kind of spiritual life that was just in it to stretch because I was always so sore from all the damn working out because I was always working out because of all the donuts. And that was just a horrible cycle to be in here. But now I have a much better relationship with my yoga practice. So it's supporting me on all the levels. And but still, I found that for me, coming in through the science aspect was a little easier to swallow. And then when I started seeing the correlation with this ancient yoga practice and tradition, I started going, wow, these ancient yogis knew exactly what they were talking about. In fact, one thing I'll share with you that's a really great practice for calming the nervous system. Like I said, I have two granddaughters. One lives on the East Coast and one lives over here. So I see the one over here a lot more often. But both of the girls really respond to this. So it's a humming practice. And in science these days, there's a lot of research and support around vagal theory. So we have this vagal nerve, a physical nerve that innervates from our brain down through the sides of our neck into our throat, and then it touches almost every single organ in our body except for our adrenal glands. And it is that gut connection to the brain. When you have a gut feeling and you really feel it here, that's where it comes from, is this big nerve. And most of that communication, 80% is from the gut to the brain, and only 20% is from the brain to the gut. Well, vagal tone is really correlated with having a regulated nervous system, which means our hormones are nice and balanced, so we don't have too much cortisol and adrenaline, and we have enough endorphins, enough serotonin, enough melatonin, so we can sleep, all of those wonderful things. So science is telling us to stimulate the vagal nerve, and one of the things that you can do is to hum. You could also sing or gargle, but humming is really easy. It's really subdued. And when you're trying to put an infant girl down for a nap, it can be really helpful. So just to take a inhale through your nose and to just exhale through your closed lips. Mm. And you might just try that on your own. Maybe it's a high tone hum or a low tone hum. And just focus on the feeling that it gives you there in the base of your throat. And you might feel it across your chest and up into your jaw. And science and research is telling us now that when you practice humming or gargling or singing, that you're toning this vagal nerve, increasing and supporting the connection from your gut to your brain, increasing your heart rate variability. So that's your ability to recover from stress when it does happen to you. And you know what the ancient yogis used to do for thousands and thousands of years at the beginning and the end of every practice? Oh, they knew long before we knew. So we've got just a few more minutes left, Amy, if there's anything you wanted to wrap up with or anything along those lines.
No, I don't have anything else. I just really appreciate everybody sharing. I want to make sure that you guys feel okay with me posting the recording since many of you shared really personal things. And if you're not really cool with that, I will cut it off early, and that's fine too. So you can send me a little note and let me know how you feel about that. If you were one of the people who shared, because I never want to impede people's sharing and what they take out of a workshop that they're attending. But I just want to be mindful that you may not want anybody to hear it, and that's fine too. So just let me know, how you feel about that. You can put it in the chat or you can send me an email or whatever.
Or I can just tell you I don't care.
Okay, that works too. But I appreciate you as always, Christine, and all the wisdom you bring to us and all the wisdom that you help us see in ourselves. Because I think we all do hold that, and we just don't always know it's there, or we forget it's there. But I appreciate it so much. And did you have one final slide you wanted to show or no?
I actually do. I figured, well,
Okay,
if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't,
okay.
it doesn't. But let's see if I can get it up here. So are you seeing this quote from the Mind Journal?
Yes.
Okay, so I love this is my mission statement for why I practice yoga therapy. Seeing unhealthy patterns in your family and deciding that those patterns end with you and will not be passed down to future generations is an extremely brave and powerful decision. So, like Sherry had shared, what do we do in this toxic culture? We're just one person. We only can do so little. But every little bit that we do, no matter how late in life we decide to do it, contributes to this brave and powerful decision. It contributes to ending these patterns that we developed that really don't benefit us anymore. We don't need to have this attachment to our caregivers. We are able to make these decisions for ourselves. And just you showing up here today supports that better world and that better vision for each one of us.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to be here. And since you've consented to the video being posted, Amy will share it with me as well. And I'm going to post it on our YouTube channel in its entirety, as well as hopefully broken up section by section so people can listen to it just a little bit at a time as they're able to.
Sounds great.
And again, if you are interested in meeting with me for a one-on-one session, I will email these slides to Amy, and my contact information is on the very next slide. So you can reach out to me directly. The first introductory call is free. We can decide if that's something that you even want to do or that I can help with, and take it from there. And maybe all you need is one 30-minute phone call, and I'm happy to do that for you. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Christine will be back in November with another workshop. You can look forward to that. And we'll be doing another weekly yoga practice in the fall. Kind of
Yes.
through the late fall and winter. So
Yeah, I think we said November through May. Yeah,
Yeah,
November
I think
through
that is
May.
what we said. So
Yeah.
more Christine is yet to come.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing more of each one of you.